what we've been studying in the Zen group is a text called the Genjo Koan. And we have just come up to the point of one of the really famous lines in that text. And so I thought I would just keep going and talk about that this morning. But first let me say, Dogen is the founder of the school of Zen that I'm part of. He lost his parents, was ordained at age 12, became dissatisfied with the teaching of the Tendai school, went to Rinzai Zen, which was very new in Japan at that time, traveled to China together with his teacher, and found somebody who he considered the person he attained the way under, and returned to Japan to teach. This is one of his early writings. It was a letter written to a lay supporter. And some people say all the rest of his teaching is a commentary on this text. So some people think that Dogen is very straightforward and says things clearly. Some people think he's totally impenetrable. Guess it depends who you are. But I'm going to do my best to be on the clear side, and I want to ask people to stop me if you have questions, because he kind of says the same thing again and again from different angles, so if we don't get finished, it isn't really important. So first, the term Genjo Koan, actualizing the fundamental point, is the translation that I first learned. Now I've forgotten what I said. It's the title of the practice intensive. And looking at the characters, which I'm not going to talk about now, the title of this text says, "All things are immediately manifest, distinctly individual, ultimately equal, in their place in the universe." So, and now I'm going to go line through line, line by line, and word by word through the text. My teacher is a Japanese person, and much of his teaching is looking at the meaning of the words, because whenever you have a translation, you just have what the translator thought. He is both a scholar and a practitioner, whereas most translators are primarily scholars and secondarily practitioners. So we have, and I just think this is the most fun. So we have the first line, and we have to study the Buddha way. So here's Buddha. This is a person, and this image means death. It's actually a bow and arrows. So I don't know. It might mean that Buddha is a person that deals with life and death, though. Do, way, road, path. The Buddha way. To study is the interesting one. The translations of study include get accustomed to, become familiar with, get used to, become intimate with. But in particular, this part of it here is a picture of feathers. And down here is it's white, blank, or innocent. This has to do, the image is of baby birds learning to fly. They watch their parents fly. They make a little try, they make little hops. Their parents help them, and they keep trying until they do it. Once in my life, I was at the Pacific Ocean taking a break on a beach, and there was this interesting thing happening in the water. It involved a big seal and a little seal. And the little seal would be on top of the big seal, and then all of a sudden just floundering in the water. And then the big one would come up again, and again, and again. And finally, we actually watched it long enough that we could see that that baby seal was learning to swim by being completely safe, completely supported. It was learning to do that natural thing that seals do. So, baby birds learning to fly, to become birds. As if you don't fly, well, I guess you could be a bird if you don't fly. But mostly we think of flying as an essential feature of being birds. So this is about humans becoming human. And my teacher, this is one of his books, his commentary on this text, he says, this is the original meaning of to study as it's used in Dogen's to study the self. This type of study is not simply an intellectual study, although of course human beings do use the intellect in the process of learning. The accumulation of knowledge alone is not enough to allow us to learn to fly, not enough for us to live truly and genuinely. In the same way that flying is the essential activity that enables a bird to be a bird, except for birds such as penguins or ostriches, studying the self is the essential activity that allows us human beings to be human. A human being is a living being who needs to study the self in order to thoroughly become human. So this study is about becoming human, and thus saying to study the Buddha way is to study the self, is saying to study the Buddha way is to become human. To become intimate with the way of Buddha is to become intimate with yourself and comfortable with yourself. And so then we have the self. And we have two characters, both of which mean self. And they put them together, and this is Jiko. And there's so little said in a dictionary about this that you have to ask the Buddhists what they meant, because we have two ideas of self. So one idea of self is a function of mind oriented to protect itself, to gratify itself. That's what we notice in introspection. Is self is composed of memories of past physical experiences. It's the self-image of the mind. This self is anxious about death. It's anxious about impermanence. And this anxiety causes desire and hatred. So that's the deluded self. That's the self that imagines it exists. The authentic self. This is a quotation from someone, but I didn't say who it's a quotation from. With the ceasing of fear and hate is the restoration of unity of mind. It's not separate from things. It is the life and death process. There's a seeing of the self. It's called Jijiu Samai. Dogen has a writing about it. And it means self-fulfillment samadhi. So we know what samadhi is. It's like, well, maybe we don't know, but I'm not going to talk about it. We have an idea of what samadhi is, and this is close enough. Jijiu, fulfillment is strange, but it breaks down into receiving and employing. So receiving a self and then using it. So this self is really momentary. At any moment, it's received, and then it's used, it's expressed, and then it's received again. It's just completely relation. It's completely about living in the world, and nothing exists accept that relation, that momentary. So studying the Buddha way, which is an idea, or it's a religion, or it's a way of life, its actual meaning is that we're learning how to be human. And we're learning to be this kind of human that's not afraid, that's not anxious, that's not worried about impermanence, because it really only exists as relation.
Say that again, Shodo, because
Yes,
what?
it only exists as relation. That place between existing and not existing, Buddhism has an understanding that everything is impermanent and everything is impermanent. There's a sense of not realness, that everything is created by the mind. And yet, that's a hand, There's really stuff here. And so we're walking on the edge between these two things. On the one hand, there are experiences, there are relations, there are events, and they're instant, they're momentary. And the whole thing is working together. So I'm just a speck. I first learned this in physics when I learned the term an event in the space-time continuum. Just a speck, not even a whole breath. So the second line is to study the self, is to forget the self. And by the way, I did all these translations because it's helpful to see how different people have done it. Most of them have it this way or very similar. So here we are studying, becoming human, becoming the self. Forget the self. One person says, go beyond the self. Losing my notes. Okay. But that's it. It's like once you do this process of becoming human, that self, that thing that's clinging to existence and worried about losing itself, it just kind of relaxes and lets go. You don't need to worry about it. And this is my favorite line. To forget the self. And this is also one that has a lot of different translations. So, to forget the self is to be verified by all things. Some people say enlightened by all things, actualized by all things, confirmed by all things, experienced by all things, authenticated by them. So what we have, myriad, lots and lots of them. Things, that's not so interesting. The interesting thing, well, it's kind of interesting. Things and dharmas. Dharma actually is the same word as used for dharma, that's teaching. It also means rules, laws, processes. And so I can't tell myself by looking at this whether it means the objects in the world or whether it means the teachings or the structures or the way things are set up. So here we have this one that has lots and lots of descriptions. And what we have is a picture of a mouth and a person speaking. This is words or sayings or speech. And over here, we have a picture of a witness stand that somebody can rise up to. And so the term witness comes up. And along with witness, guarantee, give evidence, verify, certify, and enlighten. And my take on this, which is not in opposition to what anyone else has said, is that all these beings, and I'm just going to include the physical objects and the structures of the universe. And the structures of the universe would include magnetic fields, and it would include the laws of karma, and it would include like everything that's there, like completely everything. They see us, and they create us. They make us exist. And my version of this sentence is to forget the self is to be verified by the myriad dharmas, to be certified by a multitude of processes, to be witnessed by 10,000 laws. All the dharmas and all the teachings rise up. They call your name. They affirm you. They speak you into being. They guarantee you. They testify you. They see us. They see us, and that's why we exist. The next line is to be verified by all things is to let the body and mind of the self and the body and mind of others drop off. So here we have to be verified by myriad dharmas, causes. I was not able to look that up, but everyone kind of interprets it the same way. The body and mind. So here's body. It's pronounced shin. Mind. So in Japanese, mind and heart are the same character. And the picture is a picture of a heart. So we have body, mind, and they're understood to be one thing. They're understood not to be separate, as we would have them in the West. Of self and others. 2, drop off. Shinjin Datsuraku is one of those much used expressions. Datsu means to shed, to remove, to escape from, to take off, to slew off. It's like, let your clothes drop, or let whatever, snake sheds its skin. Images such as that. Raku is to fall, to drop, to fade, or to cast off. And so in either of these, there's the sense that we're really letting something go. I like the escape one. It's like this thing that we carry around with us, this identity that we walk around with, just let it go. So these days I notice roles a lot. This morning I put on the role of somebody who teaches Zen. And sometimes I have a role of somebody who sits Zazen or practices Zen. Which are not quite the same when I'm with my grandchildren I have grandmother. Sometimes I have activist. I have farmer and conservation and, all of my selves have to do with a particular relationship between me and what's around me. And in practice, allowing all of these to drop away. So the one that's sitting zazen is the one that is not a farmer, a grandmother, an activist, a teacher. That one is just this point, this human self, which is instantaneous and like ephemeral. It's like a flash of lightning or a breath on the wind. This one sitting in context with all of the other breaths, drops of water, flashes of lightning. In context. Reb Anderson, who I studied with for a few years, used to say, we think that here's the universe, and here's me like I'm a blip on the outside of it. When you think this, for one thing, you think you could be gotten rid of, and you think it doesn't matter so much what you do. But actually, I'm in here. I'm part of the circle. If I disappeared, I would be missed. If I move, it affects like completely everything around me. And it's like, to me, this is sort of the key point about learning and practicing Buddhism, that I belong here. Not I, Shodo, not I, great person who has accomplished a lot, but just I, this little speck of life, these eyes that look out and see things. And in the seeing or hearing, that activity of seeing and hearing creates all of this, just as all of you create me and everything around us. So, to be verified by myriad dharmas causes the fading, falling away, escaping from body, mind, and heart of both self and others. Francis Cook has this lovely statement. He's a well-known translator. He says, to drop off body and mind is to drop off fear of death and attachment to ideas, opinions, religions, and metaphysical schemes. So all of those things, we don't need them. There's some things that we need in order to get through the day. Someone asked Shunryu Suzuki, how much ego should a person have? And he said, enough that you don't step in front of a moving truck. Yeah, that's pretty good. That's not too much. Actually, I don't think that requires ego. You can do that with the ephemeral, Doesn't require any permanence at all. There is a trace of realization that cannot be grasped, or no trace of realization remains. All trace of enlightenment disappears, and so forth. They this way, that way, we can forget the trace of realization. There's remaining content with the traces of enlightenment. So, oops. Realization, also known as enlightenment. In Japanese, there are 3 words that are translated into English as enlightenment. And this one is Go. And this is a picture of the heart. This is the number 5. It refers to the 5 senses, 5 like aspects of a human. So it's like the heart's here, the heart mind is here, the whole body is here, and here's the mouth. Something speaks to us in our heart, is about us. That's what realization is. So, what's this trace of realization? Well, I found it, but I didn't find any more information about what trace meant. A mark or a sign, footprints. It's a pretty ordinary thing. And then we have Kyukatsu. There, yeah. Q is to rest, to suspend, to take a vacation, to be relieved, and katsu is to stop. And these two together are have been translated as traceless. So here's the thing. There is such a thing as realization. People do actually drop away. And there's a lot of discussion about personal enlightenment or not personal enlightenment. But anyway, something happens, and there are traces. There's mixed statements, contradictory statements in the literature. One of which is it has no effect at all. It's like it's invisible. And the other of which is there are in fact fruits of enlightenment. Something is changed. If a person claims enlightenment and continues being rude to people on the street, we would all wonder. And so this refers to the traces of enlightenment, of realization, of perceiving, of deeply understanding who we are. Taking a vacation. It's like it's not about the traces. That's not the point at all. They just let go. And then right along with that is this no trace continues endlessly, or we endlessly express this ungraspable trace of realization. So we have lengthy, and we have emerges as a picture of a sprout. It's going out. And this last line is the one with the most variation in interpretations. And so I'm going to attempt to talk about it. The signs of realization. Take a break, take a vacation. And this causes a long emergence or sending out or appearance or even giving birth. And so something happens. There is some result. And you pretty much can't talk about it. But it goes on forever. People have an enlightenment experience and then they, that's all, it's like really exciting apparently. And that's all they can think about. And they're looking at everything through this lens of like, wow, not two. And seeing the miraculous working of the universe. And Dogen is referring to after that. Letting go. We endlessly express this ungraspable trace of realization. It goes on and on and on. There is no end to the practice that follows this. I thought that I was going to have trouble getting finished. And actually, we have lots of time. Oh dear. I have two books and I didn't know which one. So this is Okumura Roshi. He's saying, we endlessly express this ungraspable trace of realization. In Zazen and in all the activities of our daily lives, our practice is to express this traceless trace of realization and the reality of interdependent origination. When we practice in order to express reality, we can see that practice and realization are one. Without practice, there is no such thing as enlightenment. Although we usually think practice is one thing and enlightenment is another. We usually approach practice as the means and enlightenment as the reward. But realization is only manifested within the process of practice, moment by moment.
So you can have a realization or an enlightenment, but then the next moment you may be completely unenlightened again.
Something like that. You know, when people talk about it, people who are like sitting zazen and practicing hard, this thing that happens in zazen is mentioned. It's like it happens to everybody. Finally, it's like you get to this really quiet space. And there's nothing going on but awareness. And then some little corner of your mind goes, hey, I got it! And there you are.
Yeah. And that becomes my question, which is, I think, a non-question. There's a realization, but who is realizing? And I think why it's a non-question is I don't know that the word who even applies at that point. So, but clearly there is awareness or knowing. Am I inaccurate?
I almost don't have to add anything. But see, we imagine that I exist and I have a realization. And that's the problem with all the personal enlightenment stuff, is people think, well, I'm going to have a realization. Of course, when they have it, it gets shaken up. But thinking, I'm going to do this, and working on this, trying to have this experience, is like, it's like going the wrong direction.
In the first two translations here, the first one says no trace of realization remains. Mm-hmm. The second one says there is a trace of realization that cannot be grasped. Mm-hmm. So it seem like two different things.
Yeah. And so here we go. We got no trace remains. We got trace of enlightenment disappears. Trace comes to an end. Now, if I were really good at Japanese, I could do this, or if I had more than 8 hours, I could, do it, or if I had my Japanese dictionary that got lost by the airplane, and so forth. But let's go back here. So the image we have is realization stops, or the trace of realization stops, or takes a vacation. So saying no trace of realization is pretty good, but saying some of these other things comes to an end. We can forget the trace of realization. There is also remaining content with the traces of enlightenment. I'm not sure why he did that.
So forgetting the trace of realization or not being able to grasp it is the same as there isn't any.
See, I don't think that's quite accurate.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was my question, because
Yeah.
they seem like two different things.
So I'm going to venture into an analogy that I've used sometimes, and I don't know if it will work. But the analogy is the internet. So it's there, right? You turn it off. I forgot to turn my phone off, but I was going to. And then you're on vacation from it. You have stopped it. You have taken a rest from it. But there's still something. Let me read what Dogen says about these traces. He talks about the birds in the sky. See, a bird flies through the sky and you can't see, it doesn't leave a track, right? So, here he says, when a bird flies in the sky, beasts do not even dream of finding or following its trace. Since they do not know that there is such a thing, they cannot even imagine this. However, a bird can see traces of hundreds and thousands of small birds having passed in flocks, or traces of so many lines of large birds having flown south or north. These traces may be even more evident than the carriage tracks left on a road, or the hoofprints of a horse seen in the grass. In this way, a bird sees birds' traces. Now, he's making this up about birds. I don't think he knew what birds do. But he doesn't care.
I understand, I think, what you mean.
Yeah. And let me read, the rest of it is, Buddhas are like this. You may wonder how many lifetimes Buddhas have been practicing. Buddhas, large or small, although they are countless, all know their own traces. You never know a Buddha's trace when you are not a Buddha. You may wonder why you do not know. The reason is that while Buddhas see these traces with a Buddha's eye, those who are not Buddhas do not have a Buddha's eye and they just notice the Buddha's attributes. All who do not know should search out the trace of the Buddha's path. If you find footprints, you should investigate whether they are the Buddha's. Upon being investigated, the Buddha's trace is known, and whether it is long or short, shallow or deep is also known. To illuminate your trace is accomplished by studying the Buddha's trace. Accomplishing this is Buddhist Dharma. So, as soon as we grasp it, we miss it. In plain English. As soon as you think, okay, now I've got it. Or even, you don't think, I have got it, but you think, I'm verified by all things. You've missed it. But if you just continue practicing, the trace is both there and not there, like that bird flying in the sky. He talks about opening the hand of thought, no grasping.
I'm reminded of, in mysticism, St. John of the Cross and in the stories about Buddha, why they come back into the world is that they would prefer to remain where they are, but they suddenly start feeling that responsibility to share what they have, and that's the turning that they suddenly do. But there's always this conflict. There's always this point where they would rather be united with the divine, St. Teresa of Avila, but they know they are human beings, and therefore they have to turn and teach.
There might be a little difference.
Yeah.
Because for the Buddha, this is nirvana right here.
Okay.
There's no, I wish I were there. It's like, oh my gosh, look at this.
So that's
Wow, candy.
Yeah, that's the flaw of their dualism.
Yeah. Yeah, Christianity is
Yeah,
dualistic.
exactly.
Although mystics, I mean, who knows what St. John of the Cross really thought?
Yes. His poetry is impenetrable.
Yeah.
So is there an idea of bodhisattva then with
Well,
this?
Yeah, and what's
Or-
interesting is we're not talking about it right here, but this long emergence, this no traces of enlightenment goes on forever. That's where the Bodhisattva lives. It's like, oh, okay, so here we are, we're all together. And whether I actually personally see it is not essential in Buddhist teaching, because it's still like that anyway. Oh, we're just all here together. I'm not separate from you. I'm not separate from that kid in Palestine who just lost their limbs or something. Nor am I separate from the trees in the forest. So the idea of bodhisattva kind of pulls this back into ordinary language, sort of, and says, well, we're going to refrain from enlightenment until everybody can come along with us. But that's as if it were possible to be enlightened alone. But the vow, the bodhisattva vow, is like that's done with the limited mind. And it says, well, this is my path. I am like totally abandoning the idea that I can be happy when others are not. There are cultures that actually operate this way, but we're not in one of them. Has everybody seen that little picture and the story of the anthropologists? Someplace in Africa, I don't think they even said where it was. So we like to make memes out of other cultures. But so they were studying something or other, and they said, well, here's this pile of luscious fruit in the middle of the circle, and whoever gets there first gets all of it. And I don't know what they were studying, but anyway, they said, go, and the kids grabbed their hands and ran together to the middle of the circle. And all ate the fruit. And the anthropologist said, why did you do that? And they said, well, how could one of us be happy when somebody else has nothing? Like, they couldn't imagine being happy when other people were not happy. And it's like, in this culture, people who see it that way, well, there's bodhisattvas, but in ordinary, it's like saints, saints who can't just be selfishly happy. But it's like, so much of what Buddhism is, I think, is just like bringing us back to essential humanness, remembering what it's really like to be human before all the structures were built upon it, and particularly the fear.
So it seems to me that what this is saying in part is that we're going back to a sensation of being connected to all things and to all beings. To forget the self is to be actualized by myriad things seems to me to be a way of expressing this, what we commonly call feeling connected, or being part of, merging with the universe, if you will.
Yeah. What's interesting in these times, I don't know, past 10 years or more perhaps, is that there's more and more awareness on the conscious level of interconnection. The science of ecology has done this. Political activists talk about it all the time. Watching ourselves destroy the planet, we notice, some of us, more and more of us are noticing that place where we're responsible and what we do actually has an effect. And there's no immortal. And all of that, it's like, so there's a map of how things work, you know, or there's a description. And so our map is getting better and better. And yet, the real thing is to get out of the map. So that instead of having a thought, all things are interconnected. It's like, no, just sit down. My teacher says to sit zazen is to place yourself on the ground of reality. And even when you've got a really great story that matches the teachings as far as you can tell, it's still a story. And so you still have to let go of it.
I gotta tell a story. I had 21 days left in Vietnam, and I was on perimeter. And I was behind sandbags, and I was looking at the stars, and everything is black because it's a war situation. And I'm looking at the stars, and I'm really feeling this place of, I really am just a speck in this whole realm of existence. And really just feeling, not thinking about anything, just really enjoying the sensual pleasures of how big everything really is. Forgot about the war, all that stuff. Everything just was gone. It was just the sky, and I'm part of all this stuff. This is 1969, and all at once we got incoming, and that brought me back to the ground and said, oh, well, shit, I just want to go home. I just want to go to the world again. And it took me out of being that openness that I had back into this little space again of fear and stuff. But I'm trying to relate that to the self, and not having the self for maybe just, I don't know how long it lasts, maybe minutes or maybe seconds, but it was gone. I was gone, and next thing I know, I was back into, you're here.
Yeah.
You know, this is what's happening. So
It's a great story.
I just wanted to tell you this.
Yeah, that's great.
That's what, this is slightly off color, so excuse me, but when you're using the word getting up in a box to testify, in Latin, the root for testify is testes.
Right. Yes.
And the Romans, when they testified, would literally hold their scrotum.
Really?
Yes.
Was that
If they
this is true?
If they were in a court, they would hold their scrotum. But this is to say, what I am speaking is coming from the source of life. In other words, that was the verification.
Wow.
And that becomes, so when you use the word testify, and we're talking about going to the source, that's what came to mind.
I may never be able to use the word
No,
again.
I know. That's why Quakers swear they don't testify.
And I assume that they just didn't let women speak.
No,
right?
well, they
Yeah.
wouldn't. Which would have been really fascinating. I don't know what happened.
You could go like that, I guess. Good.
Well, I'm always been just totally puzzled by all of this, self, not self, big self, little self, however they describe it. It always seems to me that words take you away from what is being talked about.
Yep.
But one line from Martin Buber kind of says something like this. It's the lines of a relationship intersect at the self. So when you think of that, you think of the story of the butterfly's wings wafting, being part of the cause of the typhoon 6 months later around the world, and that's sort of that level of interconnectedness. And you're saying in the past 10 years, things are changing, and I think even longer.
Yeah.
The moment of the Apollo taking a picture of the blue marble,
Oh,
these
right.
people
Yeah.
said that was transformational. Suddenly, we weren't so self-centered, or, self-centered being, studying the self, with blinders on. Instead, it's like, oh, it's a little bigger than this. It's the stars overhead. And the expansion of knowledge from all this social media and stuff I can't even begin to wade into, but there's like this deluge of information. Suddenly, the story that, that like white men are so shocked at the treatment of police, black people are so shocked that white people are shocked about this.
Yeah.
Right? And yet, all of this is troublesome as it is. This expanded self is ugly. The bombs start coming in as soon as you look at this world. But this world is always bigger than that. But we're really focused on the worst of the incoming. And the moment those flickerings of peace and the no trace, there's always a trace because somewhere inside you expect the incoming. And so it's really difficult to even talk about self there when as long as there's separation.
Yes, right. It's difficult. It's difficult to let go. It's like we keep improving the map, but the point is to get off the map, which is why when we do retreats, we don't talk all day. We sit all day and have a little talk to encourage. But the practice of letting go of the thoughts and letting go of the thoughts and letting go of the thoughts again and again and again takes us, well. So what Dogen says is that even if you don't experience it, it's happening. So like I'm sitting and my mind is on a twinge in my knee or something, and I'm that even though my experience, my like superficial experience is not vast oneness, that to sit in this way, vast oneness is there. So when we practice, we're trying to tune into it. It's like we can't stop it from being there. It's there. Did that respond well to what you said?
I didn't really have a question, so.
Yeah, right, you didn't. Okay. Thank you all for coming.
Thank
you
you.
for saying things. You don't have to keep the translations. I can take them home, or you're welcome to keep them.